Yes, is joining us. Dr. Ihua, the Chief Executive Officer at NOIPolls, is joining me right now. Dr. Ihua, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good, Nancy. It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a while. Where have you been? Don't tell me you've been polling.
Been here and there.
Let's get started. You actually wrote a piece in Business Day.
Yes.
I saw the polls. Who is scared of public opinion? And for me, I was like, okay, this is quite interesting, especially at this time that the general elections are approaching, and that a lot of our leaders right now are afraid of public opinion, or are really trying to like defend themselves against, I said this, or you're being perceived at this. Why do you think that why do you think that polling is important, and why did you write that piece even at this time?
Okay, thanks, Nancy. It's great to be back here. You know, the whole essence of governance, for governance to be effective, it has to be inclusive and participatory. And public opinion polling is one of those tools that enhance inclusiveness and participation in governance. If you say you're a leader, you don't just understand what the people think as a one-off. You have to consistently and continuously engage the people to know what they think on your reforms, to know what they think on policy, and they can even help you shape policy. So, you know, polling, for example, in the US is deeply, deeply entrenched. As far back as 1936, George Gallup, the founder of Gallup Polls, you know, had done some great polling work to show that, listen, you know, every administration that's serious about governance should listen to public opinion polls. And
so for example, that Gallup poll is still in existence till today, and is very necessary, because even when they say, okay, let's calibrate and see the approval of Trump, for example, Gallup does this poll, even different media houses do their poll and all of that to calibrate the feelings of people at any time. But do you have bad or good polls? Do you have?
I mean, there are bad polls, there are good polls. There's some polls that, you know, their intention is not necessarily to feel the pulse of the people, but to shape people's opinion. You know, even the wording of the questions are tilted in such a way. A poll should be objective. You should have a sense of giving people, so what's your sample like? You know, this issue of sample size, it was Gallup that settled that issue. In 1936, the election between Franklin Roosevelt and Alfred Landon, Literary Digest had sent out 10 million dummy ballots to Americans, and received about 2.4. In fact, it's considered one of the most expensive polling projects ever. 2.4 million people, and they said that Landon was going to win with about 57% of the vote. But Gallup came with a much smaller sample size, about 50,000 sample, to say, no, hang on, Franklin Roosevelt will win the election by 62% or 68%. And at the end of the day, Gallup won. So Gallup was able to establish that when it comes to polling, it's not about the number, it's about the quality of the sample. And that's what a lot of people need to understand. So some people ask me, oh, Bell, can you say you can use 5,000 sample to tell us what Nigerians think? Yes, because it's not the number. If, for example, you go to the hospital and you fall ill, the doctor does not need to draw out all your blood to tell how you're feeling. It just takes a little tiny sample, and that's the principle of sampling, the principle of randomization. As long as it's run scientifically, meaning that it has followed a rigorous process to produce a result which can be replicated again within a certain margin of error.
I guess that brings us to the processes of polling, isn't it? Or the steps around polling.
You see,
which are different.
I mean, there are different steps.
Yes.
I mean, there are issues of sampling. How do you select your sample? There are issues of methodology. Are you doing a face-to-face household survey? Are you doing a telephonic? Are you doing an internet? These days, you conduct poll on Twitter. So there are various techniques. And beyond that, there's wording. How do you word your questions? There are issues of margin of error. What margin of error are we looking at here? Now, you see, the beauty of polling is that it's at the heart of governance. In America, for example, as far back as J.F. Kennedy, he had polling experts. Roosevelt had people like Amy Hudra and, you know, guys who were conducting big polls. Obama, Bush, Clinton all worked with people like Jeremy Rosner, Stan Greenberg. In fact, the funny thing said about Greenberg is that Greenberg doesn't just have his hand on the people's pulse. He has an IV injected into it for his ability to always advise presidents on what people are thinking at a point in time.
Do you think that is really working in Nigeria? Because you've been in the polling business now for a long time.
Over 10 years.
Yes, even before Jonathan,
yes,
I guess.
NOI has been polling for over 10 years
10
now.
years, is it?
You know, it has not, you know, picked up the way we would love it to be. In the States, for example, it's entrenched. So in the White House, there's an office or a department called the Office of Opinion Research. And the functions of that department are twofold. One, to help the administration understand what Americans are thinking about the government. And two, to help the administration to understand what the world is thinking. So you hear them commission polls in Nigeria, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, everywhere. The whole essence, and in Nigeria we should have same. So there should be an Office of Opinion Research in Aso Rock, reporting to the president on policies, helping to shape policies, helping to shape, you know, strategies, helping government define what policies they should engage.
So polling in Nigeria is not new, actually.
It isn't new. I mean, you know, in Nigeria we even have, you know, from the traditional market research field, you have the likes of Karim Tejumola, TNS, RMS. You have the likes of Shola Kinagbe. These who are people we refer to as the fathers of market research, and these guys have been polling, you know, for a long time.
Even the media polls, even the vox pop we do on the streets.
But it's how can we ensure that polling becomes a part of governance, so that consistently you are getting a feeler of what the people think about your administration, and it's not about whether they should tell you what's favorable and what's sweet. If it's not sweet, they don't tell you. Don't tell you whatever it is. So and help you.
From your piece that you've written and from the calibrations you've done, why do you think that people are afraid of public opinion? Why do you think?
It's more of a thing of knowledge. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand. So I mean, we've had that in the past.
Is it fear what they don't understand, especially with this political process
yes.
now? Or the fear being criticized? Like this administration now, a lot has been going on. Oh, that this administration doesn't have penchant for criticism at all, that they don't want to be criticized. In fact, if you criticize them, they pick you or they hang something around your neck. That's a perception.
So politicians, for example, we've put out polls in the past. It was positive. They hailed it. Oh, look at great stuff NOIPolls said about us. And we put out stuff that didn't quite seem, you know, favorable. And, you know, and we find that it's not only about politicians, it's about people too. You know, people have their own lenses, their own view, their own perception, their own perspective. So you put out the result, they don't check to see, okay, can we understand how this works? Let's look deeply at the methodology. Let's understand a bit more on the sampling and the techniques, how it was done. They simply judge based on their political or socio-political leanings. And then that tilts. But the whole idea of the piece was to help Nigerians understand a bit more about, you know, what polling is about and how you can better interpret poll results when you see them. We are coming close to election now, so you see all manner of fly-by-night posters.
I guess you'll be very busy.
This should be the time posters actually.
Yes. The funding aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, polls are not cheap. Polls are not free. Polls are expensive. You know, a gentleman called me a couple of days ago and said, oh, we want to do some polls on Osun and stuff. I said, what's your budget? You know, because polls don't come free. You know, the cost involved. Calibration alone, you know, you're talking of sampling. What's the sampling you're looking at? So these are some of the dimensions of polling that, you know, people ought to be aware of.
Can you talk to me about the most challenging poll you've done? I know you've done a lot of polls, but just give me one, the most challenging. Either in area of, okay, let me not put you in a corner, but the most challenging.
Can I? Well, you know, I wouldn't say challenging, but you know, I've realized over time that the nature of the poll you are conducting will get a feel of how people respond to it. So we'll conduct a monthly public opinion polling on the approval rating of the government, for example. So it's funny to see geopolitical disparity. You see a certain region of the country telling you, oh, he's a man. He's the best thing that have happened to us after sliced bread or after jollof rice. And you see a certain section telling you, no, he's done absolutely nothing. He should go. So you get
perhaps, for me to summarize, the approval rating of the president has been the most challenging poll polling you've done in terms of the backlash that you've gotten?
I wouldn't say most challenging. I would say the ones with the most interesting sort of feedback and comments that we get from people.
That's a smart way to answer the question. The approval rating of the president. Will you do that again before
It's
the
done
elections?
on a monthly basis. Last month was 45. It's on our website. Anyone who wants to see can check.
Yes. And it's been gradually declining.
Yes, I mean, you know, so it's on our website. It's done monthly. We may not publish, but anyone who goes to our website can have a look, can find it there.
We've just said something very important. And if this administration is serious, they would listen to this last point, which is the approval rating of the president is declining. 45% now. About that now. So who is afraid of public opinion, or who is afraid of polling? I leave it to you to answer that. Many thanks, Dr. Ihua, for joining.